Hello and welcome to our dating and coaching session. Today we're talking about coming across in the best possible way, in the right way to others. Jane and I have been having a bit of a chat about this, but looking forward to sharing with you. Now there's a lot to think about in this topic because there's if you're going to come across in the right way to others, you want to think about your clothes, your demeanour, how you say goodbye to somebody, who pays, all the sort of things in a first date. But I just want to concentrate on two particular things here, and that is being interesting and being interested. And because we're talking about a first date here and we're talking about the first impressions, and you want to make a great first impression on someone, and those two things I think are really critical, being interesting and being interested. So we'll start with being interesting first. And being interesting is about having things to say, and it's not turning up on a date and thinking, oh, what am I going to say? I'll tell them all about myself and I'll tell them all about my history. It's obviously you're going to tell your date a bit about yourself, but it's about planning what you're going to say and having some interesting topics to go to your date with. So perhaps you want to think about your interests. What interests you and why do they interest you? I love the why question because it often gives a lot more information than just asking about interests. Perhaps you want to talk about some of your interests, like you might go to a concert. For example, I went to a concert recently where Alan Titchmarsh was comparing and he told some funny jokes, so maybe I'm going to prepare and I'm going to think, okay, I'm going to bring this joke to the date because it's quite funny and it's an interesting thing to share with the date, and you know, it's quite fun and interesting. Perhaps I want to share what holidays I've been on. Now that's a very, very common source of conversation. So we want to think about something that's a little bit unique. What did we learn on holiday that we've never learned before? Or did we meet anybody interesting? Or did we go to some place that most people haven't heard of? It's trying to find something that's unique about that holiday experience that again is interesting to the other person. What about current affairs? A little tidbit in the news that you've heard that perhaps nobody else would have heard, or that particularly interested you for a particular reason. So it's important that you prepare these topics and you go on a date with various things to talk about so that you are interesting and you're not just talking about yourself, which actually can come across as very boring, as I'm sure any of you who've been on a date where somebody's spoken all about themselves all night is quite dull. So that's the first part. Second part is being interested. It's really, really important, whatever your first impression is of your date, that you're interested in them. So again, it's about preparing in advance and thinking of some questions that you can ask them. So perhaps you could ask them about their childhood, their best memory of their childhood, for example. It doesn't matter if they've had a good or a bad childhood, you're going to ask them about their best memory. What about their interests and the things that make them how they spend their time? What about if they play any instruments? Why they play the instrument? Or perhaps if they don't play an instrument, you could ask them what sort of instrument they would play if they could play anything in the world. That might elicit some interesting answers. A very interesting question that I've been introduced to recently is to ask somebody how best they like to spend their money. Now, it's not asking them how much money they've got, it's not eliciting that information, it's just asking them how they best like to spend it, because you might discover they best like to spend it on charity or on football or on food. It gives you more information about them. I think you'll find it's quite an interesting question to ask. Perhaps you want to ask them what the favourite part of the country is, or the favourite part of the world, and again, why. So any of these questions, you can think of loads for yourself, I'm sure. I've just given you a few fairly obvious ones there, but prepare in advance so that you know when you go on your date, you've got some interesting things to ask and you've got some interesting information to give. So I'd like you, Jane, to go away and prepare for your next couple of dates in this way, and then I want you to think about when you've gone on the date, how well did it go? Were you interesting? Were you interested? And I think you'll find that is really helpful. Well, I hope it is anyway. That's all for now. Thank you.